parts. In the first part, I will talk about what does a theoretical framework mean. I think that is the most important question that we need to address. What is a theoretical framework? When we are designing our research, we need to distinguish between concepts, theory, and also theoretical framework. Okay, and the next question that we need to ask ourselves is what
is a theory?
What does a good theoretical framework look like? So before we go into that question, we have to familiarize ourselves with the research process. I think we know that the research process in of itself is circular. I think it is a process that we need to revisit every part of the research every time when we are doing our fieldwork, or when we are designing our literature review, or when we are coming up with the theory or the concepts for our research. Most graduate students will make a big mistake by asking the wrong questions. For example, most of them use questions, or the kind of questions that they ask will sometimes assume that research framework or the theoretical framework, the theory and the concepts are one and the same. They are not. Okay. Theoretical framework, theory, and concepts are not one and the same. They are. You cannot use these concepts interchangeably in your study, because each of these concepts have a different meaning. All right. So we need to somehow distinguish these terms, and we need to clarify what these terms mean. Okay. Sometimes graduate students will add to the confusion by saying things like, my theory is phenomenology, or my theory is grounded theory, or even my theoretical paradigm is. So these are not correct. This in itself is wrong. Okay, you cannot say that my theory is grounded theory. You cannot say that I'm using my theory is phenomenology. It is not phenomenology. Is not a theory. Grounded theory is not actually a theory. It is actually a research method. It is not a theoretical framework. Okay. So we need to be clear by what we mean by theory. Before we go into theoretical framework, we need to make clear what is
the theory definition is.
What is a theory? Okay. So we need to understand that the theory is actually an important component of our research, especially for graduate students. A theory is a good definition of a theory is something like this. Okay, a theory is a set of interrelated constructs or concepts, definitions, and propositions that present a systematic view of phenomena by specifying relationships among variables, and with the purpose of explaining and predicting the phenomena. So this definition says three things. Number one, a theory is a set of propositions consisting of defined and interrelated among a set of variables or constructs, and in doing so, presents a systematic view of the phenomena described by the variables. And thirdly, a theory explains phenomena. It does so by specifying which variables are related to which variables and how they are related, thus enabling the researcher to predict from certain variables to certain other variables. Okay, so that is
Theory.
what a theory is. All right.
Okay.
So we need to first and foremost know what is a theory. I think I have given a definition of what a theory is, and there are many other definitions of a theory, but I think scholars are in an agreement that a theory is a set of interrelated constructs or concepts. Okay, so as I said earlier, a concept is not a theory. A concept and a theory are not one and the same, because a theory is a set of interrelated concepts or constructs, definitions, and propositions that present a systematic view of phenomena by specifying relations among variables with the purpose of explaining and predicting the phenomena. Okay. So generally speaking, most students in the social sciences will use a theory in their research. Those who are in the humanities might not use a theory, but generally speaking, those who are in the social sciences will use a theory in their research, and we need to bear in mind that a theory is, of course, as I said earlier, it is actually an important component of the research, and you cannot say that it is your theory. It is almost always that we are borrowing or using someone else's theory. At the postgraduate level, it is impossible for students to say that they have their own theory. Okay, it is not common. It is very rare that graduate students can come up with his or her own theory. Not will be using someone else's theory. Will be testing that theory, or will be applying that theory. So we don't use our own. We cannot come up with our own theory at this stage. We use someone else's theory. We apply that theory in our study in order to analyze our data. Okay, so theory is important in a research, and we have to be clear what a theory is. Okay, so we also need to understand that a theory has a number of characteristics. When we do a systematic review of a systematic literature review on theory, we will come up with a number of characteristics that a good theory should have. Okay, so a good theory needs to have or needs to be logical and coherent. So the first thing that we need to understand when we are using a theory or when we are applying a theory, that it has to be logical and coherent. Okay, that is what a good theory is. It has to be logical and it has to be coherent. Number two, it has clear definitions of terms or variables and has boundary conditions. That is number two. Number three, it has a domain where it applies. Number four, it has clearly described relationships among variables. We need to fall back on our definition of a theory, because a theory is actually a proposition or a statement that describes the interrelationship between variables. So there should be a number of variables in the theory itself. Okay, a theory needs to describe. A theory has to describe, explain, and make specific predictions. All right.
Okay.
As we said earlier, a theory comprises of concepts, themes, principles, and constructs. It must have been based on empirical data. So a theory has to be based, generally speaking, a theory has to be based on empirical data. It must have made claims that are subject to testing, been tested and verified. So as I said earlier, a theory has to be tested or applied. Okay. And generally speaking, that theory that we are using, a theory that we are using for our research, has been used by someone else, and it has been verified by someone else. Okay. It must be clear. A theory must be clear and parsimonious. Its assertions or predictions must be different and better than those in existing theories. Its predictions must be general enough to be applicable to and in several contexts. Its assertions or predictions are applicable, and if applied as predicted, result in the predicted outcome. The assertions and predictions are not inconcrete, but subject to revision and improvement as social scientists use their theory to make sense of phenomena in their world. Its concepts and principles explain what is going on and why. Its concepts and principles are substantive enough to enable us to predict future events. So these are the characteristics of a good theory. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 characteristics. Okay, 16 characteristics
how
of
we
a good
can
theory.
found the good theory, Prof? How we can select or decide that this is a good theory based on the characteristics, or just
we need to at least the theory has to have at least some of the characteristics that I have listed out here, and it has to be developed by a reputable social scientist, and that theory needs to have that theory should have been used by other researchers, and it has actually yielded results that are consistent. Otherwise, if a theory has never been, I mean, it has been applied once or twice, or in some cases, a theory might have been discredited. So in the sciences or in the scientific world, our aim is to actually disprove a theory. We can make knowledge, the advancement of knowledge actually is highly dependent on scientists or social scientists disproving a theory rather than proving a theory. Because, you know, in the social scientific world, in the academia, the most important discovery will be made only by disproving a certain theory, not by proving a theory. You know, proving a theory will not push the boundary of knowledge further. Okay.
I see.
So the biggest challenge actually in the academia or in the scientific world is to disprove a theory, because a theory is neither true nor false. Okay, you know, we can apply a theory, but generally speaking, a theory can be disproved. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, Prof.
Okay. I think that is what a theory is. I think we need to move to the next question, please.
Yes. Then about the theoretical framework itself, Prof. What is the role of a theoretical framework in research?
Okay. As I said in the beginning, a theory a theoretical framework and concepts cannot be used interchangeably because they are actually distinct concepts and they have different meanings. Okay, so let's move on to what is a theoretical framework. All right, what is a theoretical framework? A theoretical framework comprises the theories expressed by experts in the field into which you plan to research, which you draw upon to provide a theoretical coat hanger for your data analysis and interpretations of results. Put differently, the theoretical framework is a structure, concepts, and theories which you develop from previously tested and published knowledge, which you synthesize to help you have a theoretical background or basis for your data analysis and interpretation of the meaning contained in your research data. Right? The theoretical framework is the structure that can hold or support the theory of a research study. Right? The theoretical framework is the structure that can hold or support the theory of a research study. Right? So your framework will support your theory. Your theoretical framework will support basically the theory of your research. Okay? So the theoretical, what a theoretical framework does is for your research or thesis is not a summary of your own thoughts or about your research. Rather, it is a synthesis of the thoughts of giants in your field of research. Remember, I said to you that when you are using, when you are choosing a theory, you choose a theory from reputable researchers. Okay, all right. So a theoretical thoughts of giants in your field of research as they relate to your proposed research or thesis, as you understand those theories and how you will use those theories to understand your data. In essence, the theoretical framework comprises what leaders in your field of research say about your research question, about the problem you plan to investigate, and might even include suggestions of how to solve the problem, including how to interpret the findings in your data. What those leaders say helps you to develop an informed and specialized lens through which you examine your data, conduct the data analysis, interpret the findings, discuss them, and even make recommendations and conclusions. Data analysis and interpretation in the postgraduate studies is an academic piece of writing and cannot be written as conversational dialogue. It must reflect academic rigor and skills. Situating your research findings within your theoretical framework helps you to provide that rigor and skills. You can look at the theoretical framework as a structure or a data mining lens that uses knowledge from research done to date in your field to make sense of the data in your own research study. So that is, in essence, what a theoretical framework is. And we need to always revisit our research problem. We need to always revisit the literature review. Okay, as I said in the beginning, the research process is a circular one. It is not a linear process, but it is circular because we constantly need to revisit the different components of the research design before we can actually complete our study. So when we look at the theoretical framework, it is actually an important component of the research that synthesizes many things. It synthesizes what the thought leaders in our discipline had said or had actually studied, because it is actually a summary of the thoughts of the research leaders in that particular area. So we need to be clear, as I said, on what the experts in the field are saying. So that is where your literature review will come in handy. So if you have not done an exhaustive literature review, then you will have a very weak theoretical framework. So my suggestion is for graduate students to actually undertake a comprehensive literature review before embarking on your research, because that will help you to develop a good research design and also a good theoretical framework. You need to identify who are the thought leaders in your area of study and what they have said about that particular phenomena that you are studying or that you are researching. How can you add value to the research problem that you are investigating? So this can only be done if we understand the research process as circular. Otherwise, I think you will run into a lot of problems if you don't understand what a theory is. If you are too focused on data gathering, then you will lose sight of the other important components of your research. All right.
I see, Prof.
So I think I will move on to discuss how does a theoretical framework differ from a conceptual framework. I think that is also another important dimension that we need to be clear on. Okay.
Yes, but theoretical and conceptual.
All right. So I will continue. Students often experience difficulties in their research proposals and even thesis when they use the terms theoretical framework and conceptual framework.
Yes.
These concepts are often confused, even among experienced researchers, even among academics. They can get confused on what is a theoretical framework and what is a conceptual framework. Okay? Not just students. So we need to distinguish the difference between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Let me look at my notes. Okay. A conceptual framework is the total logical orientation and associations of anything and everything that forms the underlying thinking, structures, plan, and practices and implementation of your entire research project. So the conceptual framework comprises your thoughts on identification of the research topic, the problem to be investigated, the questions to be asked, the literature to be reviewed, the theories to be applied, and methodology you will use, the methods, procedures, and instruments, the data analysis and interpretation of findings, recommendations, and conclusions you will make. Put differently, the conceptual framework is the logical conceptualization of your entire research project. Saying that it is a logical conceptualization means that a conceptual framework is a metacognitive, reflective, and operational element of the entire research process. This in turn means that a conceptual framework involves a high order consideration of the following questions or issues about your research. Okay, so you have to understand that a conceptual framework is is much theoretical framework. All right. So these are the questions that actually guide you when you are thinking about what a conceptual framework is. Okay. What you want to do in your research. That is a question that you need to, that should be part of your conceptual framework. How are you conceptualizing your research? Why do you want to do it? For example, why is it important to conduct the research? Why is it significant? What aims will it seek to achieve? Which specific objective will it pursue? How much scope will it cover? All right, that is number two. Number three, how do you plan to do it? For example, which methodology will you apply? Which methods you will use? Who will be your participants? How will you gather the data? How will you analyze the data? How will you make meaning of the data, for example? And also, which theoretical framework will you use to analyze the data? Which software you will use? Which skills will you need? Which worldview will you locate your research in? For example, will it be in the positivist or interpretive based paradigm, critical or pragmatic paradigm? How will you report your findings? For example, in a research paper or in a seminar paper or conference paper, a book chapter, or a book or a thesis. So the conceptual framework actually encapsulates your whole research process. It is not just a theory. It is different from what a theoretical framework is, because it is actually your research design. In essence, your conceptual framework is your research design, because it involves the objective of your study, your methodology, your research question, and so on and so forth. How will you analyze your data? All right. So it is actually a part of it. It can be it is actually a component of your research process. That is your conceptual framework. And as I said earlier, you need to also locate the worldview of your research process. Are you a positivist? Are you an interpretivist? Are you or will it be an interpretivist paradigm, critical or pragmatic paradigm? So in essence, the conceptual framework is the umbrella term relating to all the concepts, ideas that occupy your mind as you contemplate, plan, implement, and conclude your research project. Thus, whereas the conceptual framework could be the product of your own thinking about your research study, this is the difference between, I'm actually distinguishing between what is a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework, okay?
Okay.
When we talk about the conceptual framework, it is actually focusing on the whole of the research, okay? Whereas the theoretical framework is a component of your conceptual framework. So am I making sense?
Framework.
Okay.
It's sorry, Prof, I'm interrupted. So
okay,
the
go ahead.
framework, it's part of the conceptual framework.
That's right.
I see.
So okay, because the term conceptual framework is so all inclusive that tries to unpack it in your research proposal could be quite messy. Okay.
So is it possible that in one research on one project, the conceptual framework and theoretical framework applied together?
Yes, because whereas the conceptual framework could be the product of your own thinking about your research study, okay, the theoretical framework, on the other hand, comprises other people's theoretical perspectives that you interpret as relevant to your research, and in particular, helpful in your data analysis and interpretation. Okay, so the conceptual framework is actually your own thoughts about your research. Okay, you are embarking on your own original thinking. But theoretical framework, when we talk about theoretical framework, we are actually borrowing other people's ideas. Because we want, and we are trying to apply their ideas to our study, and it helps us to analyze our data. Okay, because when you write your conceptual framework, it has to be in your own words, in your own thoughts, and it is actually a logical progression of your research, because it comprises of your methodology, it comprises of your research objectives, and also your research questions, and the method that you will use to analyze your data. But theoretical framework is just actually a combination of other people's thought on that research problem. Okay?
I see, bro. Thank you, bro.
So when we talk about a research, a theoretical framework, we are actually borrowing someone else's thoughts or ideas about a particular social phenomena, and there are many giants in the social sciences that we can borrow from. Max Weber, Anthony Giddens, Karl Marx. When you talk about political philosophy, the thoughts and also the theory coming from philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, and also many others, and we are actually just borrowing their thoughts on a particular phenomena, and we are trying to use that in analyzing our data. And but generally speaking, when we talk about theory, it is almost always situated in the positivist paradigm, because we are looking at the interrelationship between two or three variables, more than one variable. There needs to be a few variables that we are looking at, and we are trying to locate, we are trying to determine the interrelationship between these variables. Okay, so when we use the language of variables, when we use the term variables, it is actually located in the positivist paradigm. Okay.
Yes, Prof. Prof, I want to make it clear. How about if the researcher just select one of the framework, which is whether the theoretical or the conceptual? Could it be?
Say that again. Say that again.
Could it be a researcher just select one of the theoretical, which is whether the conceptual or the theoretical framework?
So when you are embarking on your study, on your research, you need to have both. You need to have a conceptual framework and also a theoretical framework. It's not either or. Okay, you need to have both in your study. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, bro.
The theoretical framework is actually a component of your conceptual framework. It is a subset of your conceptual framework. Okay.
Okay.
So you need to have both. Okay, because the conceptual framework will encompass or will subsume the theoretical framework. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. The next question that I want to address is, what is the purpose and importance of a theoretical framework in your research? Okay. The main reason you should develop a theoretical framework for your research is to have a scholarly foundation for all your sense making of the meaning contained in your data. So how do you make sense of your data? It is by using it is by having a theoretical framework. If you don't have a theoretical framework, you cannot make sense of your data. So in order to make sense of your data, you need to have a theoretical framework. Okay.
The theoretical framework function is for relate
It,
the
it is.
findings
It has. It.
with
Yeah. It is very much related to your data. Okay. How do you make sense of your data when you collect your data? When you go to the field and collect and do data collection, how do you interpret that data? How do you make sense of that data? You can only make sense of that data if you have a theoretical framework. If you do not have a theoretical framework, you cannot make sense of your data. All right?
Yes.
Because the theoretical framework helps you fit together and helps you to discuss your findings more clearly in light of existing theories. Okay? It helps you to make connection between the abstract and concrete elements you observe in your data. For example, the theoretical framework helps you to raise questions such as, what do leaders in this field theorize about my research? Question, what existing theoretical ideas can I use to investigate and to understand my research problem? Okay, according to the theories, what should I be looking for in the data to answer my research question? So these are important questions that will help you to make sense of your data. If you do not have a theoretical framework, then you'll be lost. Okay.
Yes, bro.
I think we need to move on.
I want further
Okay, do you have any
question.
questions?
Do all studies need a theoretical framework, bro?
Generally, most studies in the social sciences require a theory, especially if you are in the field of anthropology, sociology, political science, economics. All the subfields in the social sciences almost always require that you have a theory. But there are debates about whether or not a theory is required, or or you do not need a theory to go on a research journey. But when you talk about the social sciences, because the social sciences tries to emulate the sciences. So the social sciences pretend that they are just like the hard sciences. So when you talk about the hard sciences, you cannot run away from the language of variables, because it is a positivist discipline. But some researchers in the social sciences have a different view, and they will say that you can do a historical research. When you do a historical research, you do not need a theory. You can just go on a study that only require you to do an extensive literature review. So it depends largely on the kind of questions you ask. So, but the safe answer is yes. When you talk about the social sciences, you need a theory. You need a theory to guide you in interpreting your data.
If the researchers do not have any theory, can they do a kind of probing sensitizing, synthesizing or probing concept?
Yeah, you can use certain concepts to help you to guide your study. Okay, some it depends. If you use the grounded theory approach, you will go into the field without having any assumptions, because theories are a set of assumptions you make.
Yes.
Okay, so if you are a positivist, you will go into the field with a set of assumptions. But if you are using grounded theory, if you are moving from the bottom to the top, then you will go into the field without having any without any theoretical framework. You will just go into the field with some sensitizing concepts, and you will build your understanding from there. Okay, so it depends also on where you are coming from as a researcher. Are you a positivist? Are you an interpretivist? Or are you using the critical paradigm? So that is where the philosophical part will come in. So that is why most graduate students, even doctoral students, are lost because they do not understand the philosophical dimension of their research. Because they don't understand. I mean, they don't really understand the different paradigms that exist in the social sciences about how the social world operates. So, you know, as I said, graduate work is very challenging. It is not just about going to the field and collecting your data. You know, it is a circular process, and the maturity that is required to undertake a research, a postgraduate study, is understated. You know, it is almost always understated because you have to be a mature individual. You need to have a considerable amount of patience before you can embark on your postgraduate work, especially at the doctoral study, because it is actually very challenging. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you, Prof. And another question, Prof. Actually, what does the concept means, Prof?
A concept.
The theory, as you described before, and about the concept.
When you talk about concepts are also embedded in the theory. Right? So a theory is actually a statement that include the interrelationship between different concepts.
I see.
Okay. All right. So you know, when you talk about when you study ethnicity, there are many interrelated concepts. There are also theories that actually combine a number of concepts that are interrelated. For example, in political science, you talk about certain interrelated concepts. A theory that actually encompasses different interrelated concepts such as civil society, social capital, democracy. So these are concepts. These are concepts. Democracy is a concept. Okay. So civil society is a concept. It is not a theory. It is a concept. Okay. You talk about social capital, human capital. These are concepts. They are not theories. Okay. But when you want to test the relationship between these variables, then they will become part of a theory. So a theory will probably state that democracy can consolidate, can strengthen if there exists a strong civil society, a strong social capital, okay, and also and also a free press, for example. So these are concepts, you know. So this theory will combine these concepts together and then form, and then it become a theoretical framework, right? For example, ethnicity is a concept. Assimilation is a concept, right? GDP, gross domestic product, is a concept, right? But a theory will actually combine many of these concepts together, and then it will become a theory because it is a set of interrelated concepts or constructs. Okay?
Okay, Prof.
Right.
So, how to write or formulate a theoretical framework, Prof, in a research?
Okay, how do you develop a theoretical framework? Okay. An existing theory is not likely to provide plausible explanations of the meaning contained in your data without modification. You need to modify certain theories in order to interpret your data. Okay. This is because, by definition, a theory, as we said earlier, is an abstraction, a generalization, and therefore is not content or topic specific. In contrast, by definition, your theoretical framework is an analytical structure you put together to develop to suit your research purposes, which, as you know, are to answer your particular research question and address your stated problem. Therefore, the best way to develop your theoretical framework is to conduct a thorough literature review so that your theoretical framework can emerge from the literature. I think I'm repeating myself here, right? I said that earlier. Okay?
Yes, yeah. So it means that theoretical framework cannot be separated from conceptual framework. And
That's
the
right.
theoretical framework, it's a bunch of the concepts that already formulated and becomes a formulation, a theory formulation. So
Yes.
about the characteristics of good theory that you told us, there are 16 or 17 types.
Yes.
So it should be, some of them could be abstracted to be a good theory in research. So, Prof, would you kind to sum up all?
Okay. Let me just sum up what is a theoretical good. What is a good theoretical framework? Okay. You need to sometimes it is almost always that you have to modify a theory. I mean, when you are modifying a theory, when you are actually adding something to the theory, and that will be your contribution to your study, especially at the PhD level. Okay, that will be a major contribution to research. So you are not developing a new theory, but you are modifying an existing theory or adding one or two more variables in the existing theory to make it your part of your own theoretical framework. That is where your contribution comes in. Okay, so that will be part of your contribution when you are doing a PhD level study. Okay.
Okay.
So before I sum up what we've been discussing, let me just summarize what is a good theoretical framework. Asking yourself the following question should help you to develop an effective theoretical framework tailored to your own data analysis needs. I'm actually answering your question. Okay.
Thank you.
The first thing that you need to ask is there a theory that can help me to make sense of the meaning of the data that I will gather to answer the research questions? So I'm repeating myself again. Is there a theory that can help me to make sense of the meaning of the data that I will gather to answer the research questions? Are there theories that have been developed in the field of my research topic or in similar topics that might inform an understanding of my research question, my research problem, and data analysis? What do experts in the field of my proposed research say about the problem I want to investigate? This is an important question. What do they say about the research questions that I want to investigate from theoretical perspective? What do they say are the key variables to be investigated? Which assumptions, definitions, and propositions are in these leading scholars' theories, and how can I make them explicitly relevant to my research question, research problem, and data analysis? How can I modify what they have said so as to come up with my own theorization about the meaning contained in my research data? So modification is an important element. If I define the key concepts in my theoretical framework, see, I said earlier, I told you earlier that concepts are part of your theoretical framework. So even though the concepts are part of your theoretical framework, you need to define them. You need to define the concepts that you use. Okay. Does the theoretical framework I am developing address the research questions and hypothesis of my research? If you have an hypothesis, if you do not, I mean, some studies do not require a hypothesis, but you only need, some studies only require research questions. Okay, if you don't have a hypothesis, that is fine. Okay.
Okay.
Does the theoretical framework I am developing address my research problem? So this is another question that you need to consider.
Yes.
Have I included in my theoretical framework all the key theories and analytic models in literature that relate to my study? Will the use of this theoretical framework enable me to analyze and discuss the findings in my data? Does the theoretical framework have a logical structure and make academic sense? Is my theoretical framework easily applicable to my data analysis? Does my theoretical framework encompass all the key variables or factors in my data? Does my theoretical framework enable me to explain the meaning contained in my data? Have I used the latest data available on the theoretical aspects of my planned research? And lastly, given my theoretical framework, which data shall I include in the analysis and which data shall I exclude and why? Okay. So these are key considerations or key questions that you need to address in order to develop an effective theoretical framework. And I think, by looking at these questions, you will be able to distinguish between what is a concept and what is a theoretical framework and what is a theory. Okay, these are distinct concepts. They cannot be used interchangeably in your research because they are distinct. Okay, and of course, in order for you to make sense of the theory, or in order for you to develop an effective theoretical framework, it has to be based on a good literature review. A good literature review will, when you have done a good literature review, it will help you to develop a good theoretical framework because you will look at studies, similar studies that have been done in your proposed topic, research topic. Without a good theoretical framework, without a good literature review, you cannot develop a good conceptual framework.
Yes.
So a good conceptual framework will only come about if you have done a thorough literature search and you have actually looked at how other researchers have done their research in a similar topic, the kind of method they use, the kind of questions they ask, what they have missed, and how you can actually add value to the existing topic by asking the questions differently, and so on and so forth. This will only come about if you have a good understanding of the research topic, without which you will not be able to embark on a sound study. Okay?
Okay,
Any other questions that you want me to address before we call it quits?
I think that's enough for now.
All right.
About
Okay.
the thematic, about the